Yesterday, we lost arguably one of the greatest Pan-Africans to ever grace this earth. Today, we celebrate Assata Shakur as her legacy lives on through all of us, including this podcast. All this and more after this intro.
Please join me in praying that I don't say something we all regret. These are dangerous times. Mr. President, are you sure about this? It's not a coincidence that in the scriptures poverty is mentioned more than 2,100 times.
Look in my eyes, what do you see?
These issues are as alive as they ever were.
Neon lights, Nobel Prize, when a mirror speaks, the reflection lies.
This is not about charity, it's about justice. Justice and equality are mates, aren't they? Justice always wants to hang out with equality, and equality is a real pain in the ass.
I'm the smiling face of your TV.
I changed the channel.
Oh, there's a law of compensation, and there's an accounting to be held, an accounting that shall make the depression of 1929 seem as a prosperity when it breaks upon.
Only you can set you free. The cult of personality.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You gave me fortune. You gave me fame. You gave me power in your God's name.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Indigenous Nightmare Podcast. My name is Isaac Jasper. I want to get right into this. As yesterday was a very deep day for a lot of Pan-Africanists, a lot of individuals who believe, still do, in liberation, Black liberation, and stood up for that for themselves, like myself. And I wanted to take yesterday as a day of mourning, as stated in the post that was put out, because that's exactly what was needed. When news like this hits, it comes for especially individuals from the diaspora. It comes harder because it really ferments for us how much work is still needed to stop individuals like Assata from not reaching to see liberation. And what I mean is that, they've worked their whole life, individuals like Assata Shakur, Mumia Abu-Jamal, which we'll be talking about today, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, Kwame Ture, all of these individuals have, sacrificed their life, Leonard Peltier, in different forms of sacrifices. And, it's unfortunate that we live in a world and in a reality where they might not see liberation. And we could, jump to why and point the finger, but I think that, moving forward, there's one clear answer: imperialism. We should not be blaming ourselves. To speak of Assata Shakur is to speak of a life that the American empire intended to erase. Born Joanne Deborah Byron in 1947, her journey from a child navigating the brutal landscapes of Jim Crow segregation in North Carolina and the northern racism of New York City to the revolutionary thinker known globally as Assata Shakur is a direct map of how Black consciousness is forged in the furnace of colonial violence. Her early life was not a prelude of radicalism It was a foundational curriculum in the mechanics of white supremacy, teaching her that whether in overt terror of the South or the systemic neglect of the North, the conditions of Black people was one of deliberate subjugation. This lived experience, not abstract theory, was the seed of her revolutionary Pan-Africanism, a politics that understood that the fight for Black liberation in the United States of America with 3Ks was inextricably linked to the global anti-imperialist struggle against the same Western powers dominating Africa, Asia, and what is known as Latin America with 3Ks. By the time she joined the Black Panther Party and later the Black Liberation Army, Assata was not a criminal. She was an insurgent in a war that the state had already declared on our people. The full force of the colonial apparatus through the FBI's COINTELPRO program was unleashed upon her, not because of isolated acts, but because her intellect and her unwavering commitment to liberation posed an existential threat to the system. The 1973 shooting of the New Jersey Turnpike that left her wounded and her comrade Saeed Malik Shakur dead was an attempted state execution, and her subsequent trials were political theater designed to legitimize her elimination. Her 1979 escape from the prison and her asylum in Cuba was not a flight from justice, but a strategic repositioning within the international trenches of this war. Cuba itself, again a nation resisting relentless U.S. imperialism, granted her sanctuary as a profound act of anti-colonial solidarity, humiliating the American empire and proving that the bonds of internationalism are stronger than the chains of the oppressors. For this act of defiance, she was forever hunted, placed on the FBI's terror list as an old woman, you guys. A clear message that the state's greatest fear is not violence, but the power of liberated ideas, speaking for ourselves, advocating for truth. Assata Shakur's legacy is the unbroken circle of resistance. Her life teaches us that exile is not a defeat, but a reformation, and that the duty she named, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win, is a charge that passes to every generation until the final chain of imperialism is shattered. She has transitioned to ancestry, but her war is now our inheritance. So we say unequivocally, rest in power. I don't really think people understand, and this is from an insert from an article that I'm going to be producing later on today, submitting. Her life, her legacy will continue through those who loved, accepted, acknowledged that that was a sacrifice that was made. And she was forced to do that in order for her to live freely, knowing that she was innocent of charges. And we're going to get into that too. She was innocent of these charges that the state said that she had committed. See, they weren't going after her because she quote unquote killed a cop. No, that's not what this is about. It's because her intellect empowered, just like at that time many intellects did, empower so many to do what was needed to put the liberation back into the hands of the people and not into the hands of some proxy oligarchical sympathizing pork chop eating Cadillac driving institution or individual. She was a part of a movement that understood that Black liberation and Black sovereignty was the only key and the only way forward in order for people to live an equitable life. We can no longer sit here and continue to advocate for liberation and sovereignty and self-determination and not take into consideration the words that Assata Shakur spoke into existence, that this was an imperialist state. She knew it then and we know it now. So how are we going to live up to a legacy to a life that again did not get to see their own liberation, because living in Cuba was not liberation. Imperialism still ran rampant, and Africans are still being exploited, whether it's for coltan and cobalt in the Congo, whether it's for proxy wars going on in Rwanda and Sudan, whatever it may be. We are always being used at the expense and at the dispense of the European world, of the Western world. And she understood that. Like I said, we're today celebrating and acknowledging Assata Shakur. And so I want to, one, cut to a quick break real quick of Assata, talking about imperialism and talking about the people and what they should be doing in this time, in this moment, then and now, which should be done. So again, welcome to Tin Media. This is the Indigenous Nightmare podcast, which you guys can watch every Saturday. It is a Tin Media exclusive. Please like, share, subscribe, and help out if you can. And also, if you see up here, there's a QR code. You can, do that little QR code thingy, and it'll take you to the Patreon, and you can subscribe for free, which you can, get notifications a little bit ahead of a time. But it also helps us because we don't know when YouTube is going to X us out, being that Israel just signed a contract with YouTube. So I don't know if I'm not going to suppress my voice, and I'm also not going to suppress the voices of this network. And so we might have to find elsewhere. And so Patreon is a good way for you to help us out, because over there we have a little bit more free reign. We have a little bit more of ability to speak our mind. And so more content is over there as well. So you can check that all out. And that's at patreon.com/tin media. But again, we're going to shoot to this quick little break here. Again, thank you guys for joining in. If you are just barely seeing this beautiful face and coming about this network, then welcome. And we hope that you continue to watch us moving forward. Again, we're celebrating and acknowledging, but also going through a little bit of history regarding Assata Shakur. And we're going to also, towards the end, kind of call out some people if we got some time, being that it's not as important as celebrating the life of Assata Shakur. So here is Assata talking about imperialism and expressing what the people should be really striving for and what their capabilities are.
The whole liberation of oppressed people in the United States had to do not with climbing up some ladder to success, not for asking to be just like Rockefeller or just like DuPont or just like Ford, because that would only continue the oppression and exploitation of oppressed people in the United States, and specifically African people born and raised in the United States. Socialism is an integral part of building social justice on this planet. The condition of my people, my history, was very much connected with other oppressed people, and I began to see that the same foot that was on the necks of the Vietnamese people, that was on the necks of all oppressed people on the planet, was the same foot that was on my neck. And so I began to understand that imperialism has to go. It is a poison that is killing people all over this world. The priorities of this planet have to be completely changed. And instead of profits, instead of policies that destroy the earth, that destroy the water, that destroy human beings, I believe a policy that protects people, that makes people live in a community, a world community. That's what I believe. That's my basic political commitment. Government, the racist, at this point, almost fascist politics of the United States government is that political prisoners are conscious. Political prisoners are conscious of the reasons for that oppression and are clearly struggling against the system. Mumia Abu-Jamal is on death row, not just because he's an African man, but because he is an African man that is capable of politicizing all of the people in the United States about the reality of the United States. He's capable of pulling the sheep's clothing off of the wolf and exposing the United States government as the vicious, hungry, greedy wolf that it is. And so I believe that it is most important for anybody who believes in justice, who believes that human beings have the right to be free, to struggle to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, to struggle to free all political prisoners and prisoners of war, and to struggle for a new political, economic reality in the United States.
All right. To struggle for a new political identity. I think that that's very important, and let's just break that down. What we should be striving for as Pan-Africanists? Should we be striving for working with a system that we know has always oppressed us, that has caused the ecocide, the menticide, that has caused the hegemony, that is the hegemony? Or is it to create a new and understand that there have been modes and ways of moving and living that have been alienated from us, but most importantly, they've been co-opted to then suit the needs of capitalism and imperialism? We've allowed proxy systems to take float, to take aim at other indigenous communities in a neo-colonial way. When I hear that we need a new political identity, a new political way forward, I hear that we need Pan-Africanism, that we need decolonialization, that we need a new system to be implemented that does not alienate anybody, but always puts forth people, equity, understanding, all of these, and you know, the nuances that come with this as well. We should be striving for a world where we don't have a caucus of people mourning a Nazi like how we've been seeing this past month. We as individuals should be striving for a better future for not just ourselves, but also for our youth, because again, we should not be getting comfortable with passing down generational trauma and generational work. We have so many people out here saying and advocating for, if they don't see liberation, you know, well then hopefully my kids, you know, get to. No, you have to strive. We should not be fermenting in the back of our minds that, you know, as much as we should have a revolutionary understanding of it, is, you know, is what I'm getting at. And I think having an identity, a political identity, does not come through the oppressor, does not come through shucking and jiving to the system that we know that has alienated us all. Doesn't seem remotely even ideologically sound to me. And that is one of the main components that gets us on a different track. You know, instead of liberation, it's conformation, and we always come to this consensus every single time. And I think Assata understood that even then, even now, even that these little breaks in time periods where we allow neoliberal and colonial war hawk like identities to fester in our diasporas, we allow for neocolonialism and for settler colonial behavior to run rampant and continue to oppress our communities. That is the biggest problem that we have, is that we have so many people out here enacting the same things that the oppressor did, and they look just like us. The individuals that put Assata Shakur in 2013 on a terrorist list, some of them look like us, meaning that they have fully fallen for an agenda of misidentifying and at the same time creating an example for those to look at, for this is what happens when you go against us, when you have an identity, when you have formitted and solidified a self-understanding that also is incorporated through a collective understanding of what this system has done to us. And Assata understood that. And the biggest thing that they had, and one of the main components, was these court cases, these prison, like the amount of COINTELPRO, the amount of manipulation that the media was spinning at that time, and that the FBI was spinning, is egregious. The court case and the FBI filings involving Assata Shakur do not represent a pursuit of justice. They were a colonial campaign to neutralize a revolutionary black woman whose very existence threatened the foundation of the American imperial project. To understand this legal history, it is to understand that the courtrooms were not halls of justice, but theaters of war, where the state wielded the law as a weapon of counterinsurgency. The primary event that made her a target was the May 2nd, 1973 shooting on the New Jersey Turnpike, a confrontation that she herself described as an ambush. This event left New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster and her comrade Saeed Malik Shakur dead, and Assata herself severely wounded. Shot with her hands in the air from her hospital bed, the legal prosecution began. She was charged with first-degree murder, assault, and possession of a weapon, despite forensic evidence suggesting that she could not have fired the weapon that killed Forrester. This was the opening salvo in a judicial war of attrition. Between 1973 and 1977, Assata Shakur was indicted in relation to 6 other so-called criminal indictments, from bank robberies to a kidnapping accusation, facing a total of 10 felony charges across multiple states. The strategy, as revealed through the declassified COINTELPRO documents, was clear. If the state could not convict her for the Turnpike shooting, they would bury her under an avalanche of charges, ensuring that she would spend her life in a legal labyrinth, isolating her from the movement and draining its resources. This is the classic colonial tactic to divide and conquer, applied through the judicial system. The trials themselves were a spectacle of state power. In 1977, she was acquitted of the charges related to the alleged bank robberies in the Bronx. In a separate case, Manhattan, where she was accused of attempting to murder a police officer, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before acquitting her. And in the Queens kidnapping case, the charges were ultimately dismissed. These acquittals are not minor footnotes. They are profound evidence that the state's case was built on sand, on fabricated evidence, and coerced testimony. Yet the centerpiece remained the New Jersey trial on the Turnpike shooting. Presiding over this trial was Judge Theodore Appleby, who allowed the prosecution to present a case built on circumstantial evidence in the testimony of the surviving trooper, whose account was inconsistent. The all-white jury convicted her in March of 1977, and Judge Appleby delivered the maximum sentence, life in prison for the murder of Forrester, plus additional consecutive sentences totaling over 30 years. This verdict was not a reflection of guilt, but a political mandate to erase her from the struggle. The FBI's role, documented in their own files, moved this from judicial bias to outright political warfare. Through COINTELPRO, the Bureau's explicit mission was to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize Black nationalist organizations and their leaders. Assata Shakur was a primary target. The FBI files portray her not only as a criminal, but as an enemy of the state, a key ideological leader whose influence needed to be crushed. This framing continued long after her 1979 liberation by her comrades from the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women. Her subsequent asylum in Cuba transformed her from a domestic prisoner into an international symbol of resistance. And the U.S. state's response was to escalate its campaign onto a global stage. In 2013, the FBI took the unprecedented step of placing a 65-year-old woman living in political exile for over 3 decades on its most wanted terrorist list. This was not a legal classification, but a profound act of ideological propaganda. It was a deliberate effort to retroactively justify decades of persecution and to frame the entire Black liberation movement as a terrorist enterprise. It served to immediate activists at home and to pressure the Cuban government, all while broadcasting a message to the world. Any challenge to the U.S. power, especially from Black radicals, will be met with a full eternal force of the imperial state. The $2 million bounty on her head and her designation as the first woman on that list in a testament not to her danger, but to the state's enduring fear of her liberated mind. The legal cases and the FBI files against Assata Shakur are not a record of crime and punishment. They are an archival evidence of the state's war against a people's right to self-determination, a permanent indictment of a system that can only maintain its power by criminalizing the quest for freedom itself. They criminalized her for simply being so outspoken that others would listen, that others would understand that the struggle that she was under was the same struggle that they were under. And in order for us to free ourselves, we have to work together. See, you have to really understand what COINTELPRO was really all about, is that they understood that when we all work together, when we all put ourselves in a position to understand truth, solidarity, self-determination, and all these words that come with it, left, right, and in between, we start to really understand who is the enemy. These cases that were brought up on Assata Shakur were nothing more than examples to try and make us feel some type of fear in regards to, if we wanted to defy this system, this is what exactly is going to happen to you. And it's not just Assata Shakur. They gave us other examples. Mumia Abu-Jamal, which we're going to get into in a minute. Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Leonard Peltier. These are all examples, and there's even other examples as well. The fact that justice, if you can even call it for justice for Medgar Evers, wasn't given until after he was dead, until after the bullet had hit him. This is not right. And this is the words of Assata, the life of Assata, the actions of this state against Assata show us clearly what this system is all about and what we should actually be striving for. And it's the same stuff that Assata talked about. The same stuff that she's going to get ready to talk about. I have a compilation of, a mixture of the same conversation, but I really want individuals to understand that this was said then and it resonates so much now. Why? Why does it resonate so much now? Well, I can tell you why. Because we haven't primarily fixed the issues that affected Assata then, that affected Assata now, that affects us now and affected her yesterday before her passing. We have to be very clear. The more that we allow this system to pander and ponder to us as our leaders to the ending of our oppressor, to the ending of our oppression, and there are oppressors, we fall for that trap every single time. She understood it then. We need to start understanding it now because we're running out of time. Whether you believe it or not, I think we're running out of time. And I think it's very clear what needs to happen and how we need to start thinking moving forward. Is that the moment that we have seen, and we've seen many instances that this system has worked against us, we should throw it in the fucking trash. We should not be thinking, advocating, or contemplating on if there's anything good with this system when it has shown us for what, the 500 years that it has been nothing but cruel, oppressive, genocidal, fratricidal. No more. Here's a 6-minute and 50-second video of Assata Shakur saying what I'm saying. So if you don't want to, believe me, believe what, an individual that risked her whole entire life to continue advocating for Pan-African liberation, for all people to be liberated from the constraints of imperialism.
The day before it was time to escape, I called my grandmother, and I couldn't call her, and say, I'm getting ready to escape. And so she said, I want to tell you something. Are you listening to me? Yes, grandmother. I don't want you to get used to that place. Don't get accustomed to that place. Do you hear me? Yes, grandmother. Are you sure you hear me? Yes, grandmother. I do not want you getting used to that place. Do you hear me? Yes, grandmother. And so when I hung up the phone, it was like a sign. It was like, you know, my grandmother knew. It was like everything was ready to go, and everything went fine. And even though they were given bail, the bail was $100,000 apiece. And only a few of them we were able to bail out. I think that we cannot look at the Black Panther Party in the past. We cannot look at the Black Liberation Movement as something in the past. African people are still not free, and there are still many, many political prisoners in the United States. It is time for us to demand total immediate amnesty for all political prisoners and prisoners of war. If we do not take ourselves seriously, if we do not take our movement seriously, then we will have to hang our heads in front of our ancestors. It's real right now. I can't be any other way. Today, my mother died. And I didn't know if I could do this, but since I didn't have anything else to do, and I figured this was the best homage I could pay to my mother, is to try to carry on her tradition, what she passed down to me, what my grandmother passed down to her, and what their foremothers passed down to them. I hope that I can live up to my mother's example, and I hope I can live up to my ancestors' expectation of me, because I really believe that I have a duty to all those who have come before me. I was kept in a room, isolated for something like 4 or 5 days. I was beaten, tortured. It was a hellish experience. No one was permitted to see me. My aunt, who is also my lawyer, Evelyn Williams, had to get a court order for her and my mother and my sister to come and see me. I was in prison altogether 6.5 years. I spent more than 2.5 years in solitary confinement. Much of that was in men's prisons. In other words, I was the only woman. Even though they say that there are no political prisoners in the United States, I was kept in solitary confinement, kept in men's prisons because of my political beliefs. So you figure that one out. What it was prison. Prison was hell. It was a new kind of plantation. I feel like a maroon woman. I feel like an escaped slave, because what I saw in the United States in those prisons was slavery. It was black people with chains in cells. It was just poor people, just stepped on and smashed. I'll never forget what I saw. I'll never forget what I've lived through. I'll never forget what my people have lived through. We started to feel tender toward each other. We started to feel an attraction, to feel like human beings again, I guess is the word for it. And the subject of sex came up, and we thought about it, and we talked about it. And it was really heavy. It was a heavy, heavy thing, because I didn't know how to feel because so much that was around us was like slavery. It was like very clear they were out to wipe us out. And it was real. It wasn't any fantasy, wasn't any joke. They were out to take our heads. And, I felt like a slave. I'm sure he must have felt just like a slave. And we said, well, how could we even think about bringing a child into this world? But then what other world is there to bring a child in? The world is a terrible place. And, I thought about my mother, my grandmother, my great-great-great-grandmothers, and what they must have thought about as slaves, bringing life into this world. And, we just decided that we were going to live, we were going to live, we're going to struggle, and we're not going to kill our own hopes. We're not going to kill our own life. We're not going to kill our right to live. And so we just decided to be human beings, to be people. In spite of all the people that were trying to squash us down and all the forces that were trying to dehumanize us, we decided to be.
Let's get right back into it, you guys. I just want to say, the stories of Assata Shakur and Mumia Abu-Jamal are not separate tragedies. There are parallel chapters in the same bloody manifesto written by the American empire, a deliberate blueprint designed to teach a singular, terrifying lesson that this is the price of defiance. That's what this system wants you to know. That you go against it, and this is what happens, and these are the examples that we have for you. They have essentially rolled out what would be a through that meat patty line that Mumia Abu-Jamal talks about in the prison industrial complex that was created by this imperialist system. They have given you different examples, like different cuts of deli meat, as to what they could do to you or what they want to do to you when you defy them. And Assata Shakur was just one of those examples. If Assata's life in exile demonstrates the international reach of the state's vengeance, then Mumia Jamal's decades in the tombs of a penal system reveals its domestic depths. Both were brilliant, vocal members of the Black Panther Party, organizations whose core crime was not violence, but practicing community survival and articulating a political analysis that named the U.S. as a colonial power. For this, the state marked them for elimination. Mumia's case stemmed from the 1981 death of a Philadelphia police officer, Daniel Faulkner. Mirrors Assata's, and it's a fundamental injustice, a trial overseen by the notoriously racist judge Albert Sabo, who allegedly boasted that he would, quote, help them fry that quote unquote nigger as a cascade for suppressed evidence and coerced witnesses. His conviction and death sentence were not a judicial outcome, but a political ritual of modern day lynching meant to hang the corpse of a revolutionary in the public square as a warning. While Assata was liberated by her own comrades into exile, Mumia was buried alive in the prison industrial complex, yet both fates served the same state objective: to make an example of those who dared to challenge the empire's narrative. The ultimate sacrifice they have paid in the systematic destruction of their personal lives transformed them into living monuments of state terror. Assata's sacrifice, even returning to her homeland, living for decades with a price on her head, forever separated from her family and community by arbitrary line of imperial hostility. Mumia sacrificed his very freedom, enduring over 30 years on death row, watching generations from a cage pass by, his health systematically deteriorating by carceral neglect. The state's strategy is a brutal calculus It cannot physically kill the revolutionary. It will serve their roots, isolate their spirit, and contaminate their name until the person is erased and only the state's caricature of a cop killer, quote unquote, and a quote unquote terrorist remains. They don't want you to know the true history of Assata Shakur. So they try and distort what her and Mumia and Imam Jamil Al-Amin, what Leonard Peltier have done and have sacrificed and have given to people like me. They don't want you to know this. They want you to see them for quote unquote what they classify them as quote cop killers, as quote unquote terrorists, and they're not. How can a terrorist, how can someone be a terrorist when they are living under a terrorist state and they're the ones being oppressed? So we have to watch out for vocab, because this is the essence of the terror state. It weaponizes the legal system not to find the truth, but to administer punishment as a broadcast and to broadcast a message of absolute domination. The relentless pursuit of Assata across oceans and the relentless effort to execute Mumia are performances of power intended to create a chilling effect that stretches from the streets of Philadelphia to activists all around the world, screaming that the resistance is futile and the empire is eternal. They want us to fucking cave in, and we shouldn't be doing that. The empire's greatest miscalculation was failing to understand that in the making of them examples, they were creating icons. The very notoriety of the state intended to crush them has become their platform. From his cell, Mumia's voice has become a beacon of journalistic truth, his books and radio commentaries, reaching a global audience, proving that the walls cannot imprison a revolutionary idea. From Cuba, Assata's autobiography became a foundational text for the movement. Her words, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom," echoing in the protests from Ferguson to Gaza. The state sought to silence them, but instead amplified them. The intended lessons of terror have been inverted by the people. Their fates are no longer warnings of what happens when you fight back, but proof of why fighting is necessary. The lifelong persecution of Assata and Mumia Abu-Jamal is the American empire's confession of their own fragility. It proves that a system built on genocide and slavery is so inherently illegitimate that it must terrorize its critics to survive. Their sacrifices are the ultimate indictment, exposing the nation that poses as a beacon of freedom as a desperate as a desperate terror state. Yeah. Terrified on the very freedom it claims to uphold. Let us move forward knowing that Mumia Abu-Jamal, that Assata Shakur no longer that Assata may not no longer have to deal with this, but Mumia does. Mumia has to still live under the constraints that he lives under. And it's not right. It's not fair. It's not just. Mumia Abu-Jamal is innocent. Assata Shakur knew he was innocent and advocated, as you've seen in those videos, for all political prisoners to be free, because they have, under this system, they have a purpose, which is to make an example for us to look at and then get scared of when we want to rebel, when we want to be revolutionary, when we want to liberate ourselves from the chains and the shackles of imperialism and every other negative ism and ist that comes with it. We must be very clear moving forward that, again, Assata Shakur may not be here, but the fight for Pan-Africanism still continues. And we must show in every move and in every step that we make that her life does not go unremembered, unnoticed, and that she gets to, even in the afterlife, feel some form of liberation that she did not get to feel here in the physical. That is what we should be striving for. We should also be striving again for the liberation of all political prisoners, because again, Mumia Abu-Jamal is sitting there rotting in prison with his health declining, the same as Imam Jamil Al-Amin, living with stage 4 cancer, with an abscess on his right on his chin, or right here on his cheek. We must be very clear very clear in what is to be done moving forward. We cannot keep placating with our own liberation, because placating with our own liberation creates more doors, more avenues, more guide, paths for this system to start alienating and oppressing us all. I want us to now take some time to really reflect on Mumia Abu-Jamal and the words that come out of his mouth, in hopes that we can really understand that if we could not help Assata, we can damn sure help Mumia right now. There should be no reason why any Pan-African is not out there saying free Mumia Abu-Jamal. Not just free them all, say all of their names. Because free them all was created so that white people didn't have to say every single name that was a political prisoner that this system has alienated, subjugated, and is fucking genocided. So again, it's free them all, but say every single damn name. Because moving forward, I can no longer, on this network, allow individuals to just placate with people's lives. That will be the next segment that we get into after.
Well, remember back when we were young, and we was back during the Vietnam War, we used to talk about the military-industrial complex. Well, now you have the prison-industrial complex. And you have what is the ultimate solution to America's economic problem. Those who are poor, those who are powerless, those who have no access to the wealth that one needs to survive, and perhaps wealth isn't, but the resources one needs to survive. In an area where there is corporate downsizing and there are no jobs and there is only a service economy and education is being cut, which is the only rung by which people can climb. The only growth industry in this part of Pennsylvania, in the eastern United States, in the southern United States, in the western United States, is quote-unquote corrections, for want of a better word. The corrections industry is booming. And this joint here ain't 5 years old. Some corporations made a mint off of this thing. This thing cost millions of dollars to be built and constructed. But second to that, you have across the United States, for the first time in modern history, you have small rural counties and districts begging the government, build a prison here, please. There was a time when it was, not in my backyard. You better not. I don't want that here. But now they're talking about, jobs. That's the reality. That's the reality that we're working with. And of course, blacks, Latinos, Hispanics, Mexicans in the West, and Puerto Ricans in the East, and so-called white trash, poor whites, are the raw material now. We're like the hamburgers in McDonald's. We're the raw material now. We're being fed into this. And what you see in Congress and what you see in state houses are the greasing of the conveyor belt on that, that meat patty line. Because there are no laws anymore. Think about it. When you look at the trend of the law, and analyze the cases, read the cases and see what they're saying, you don't hear anybody talking about, search and seizure, Fourth Amendment, or any other amendment. What you hear in popular discourse on talk radio stations or in the newspaper is lock them up yesterday, or kill them, you see. And it becomes a political, again, an engine feeding an industry, the prison industrial complex, you see. And it is so naked now, so negative now, that as Monica said, you can have over 1.1 million people in this prison, in these prisons. And you'll have people saying, well, they need to lock up more people. You'll have people actually saying that. Of course they don't know what they're talking about, but they're just following a script that has been laid down to them, by the media, by the politicians. When you spoke about, that, I thought about a recent article that was in the New York Times. You may have seen it by Saul Wachtler, who used to be the presiding chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals. And I laughed when I read it. I really did. I had a belly laugh. Because here was a guy who was, for all intents and purposes, a hanging judge. And if somebody, made a claim before his court, well, you gets nothing. Shot people down like, it was fun. But in his article, he talked about the difference between reading a brief about an inmate who sued about the humiliation of strip searching and going through that experience himself, and how devastated he was by it. But every one of those 1.1 million people, and increasingly when you look at least across the country now, you don't have to go to prison to go through that humiliation. You can go to your average police station down the block. Someone gets arrested for a traffic violation, a ticket, and men and women are being strip searched in every city of America. You see what I'm saying? So, when he was in a position of power, and he could have said, this is unconstitutional, or it violates this thing. Doesn't make a claim. Next, denied. And he didn't sense how wrong, how cold-hearted that was, until it was him that had to spread his buttocks.
All right, we are back. Let me get rid of this banner real quick so we can get into this last segment. I hope you guys have been enjoying, again, the Indigenous Nightmare podcast. I know this one does not have this beautiful face on there as much, but I wanted to give visuals to what I was going over, and I'm hoping that you guys enjoyed that as well. The unwavering defiance of Assata Shakur and the decades resistance from political prisoners like Mumia Abu-Jamal cast a harsh and unforgiving light on a different kind of betrayal happening within our own communities. I was on TikTok, and I'm on TikTok a lot. You guys can follow me over there. I believe it is Isaac Jasper 97. I'll have the link in the description. But I was on, was doing a lot of Twitter spaces, TikTok spaces, and similar to kind of like the Twitter spaces where I would be on every single day, with a said group of people. And it was good, while it lasted. But I can say that I came across a lot of Zionists, debated a lot of Zionists, and a lot of them have changed or culturally appropriated or have been called out and have now, tried to revamp and create a new identity, for themselves. And I came across someone that was doing that, and he did that also in the wake of Assata Shakur, passing. And yesterday made some very bullshit ass videos. I didn't have time to mock them up, but I'm going to be talking about it in another episode, because I'm going to be talking about grifters and talking about fake ass individuals and Zionists you need to watch out on TikTok. So he'll be brung up, and you guys will see who I'm talking about. But I also have the link in the description to really see the foolery and the coonery that was being administered. I'm going to continue to read from this article that I'm getting ready to roll out. While they paid an ultimate price for their liberation in politics, we are now forced to confront the coercive reality of fake love and the opportunistic grift from so-called leaders who perform Pan-Africanism while actively undermining its revolutionary core. The legacy of Assata, the legacy of Assata is not just a weapon against the external terror state. It is also a measuring stick against which we must judge the allegiances of those who claim to speak for us. We are not in an era of cultural drifters and ideological subduers who dress in the aesthetics of empowerment, but who end whose end goal, damn, I can't even read my own fucking writing. Oh, whose end goal is a seat at the colonial table, not its dismantling. I want to talk about Danny Milagro on TikTok. Here is a figure who once openly supported the Zionist project and ideologies of settler colonialism that is a direct antithesis of everything Pan-Africanism stands for. After facing black backlash, he performs a public reversal, but the question remains, what is a genuine political transformation born of deep study and solidarity with Palestine? Or was a strategic rebranding to maintain influence and revenue stream? When such a foundational principle is treated as a negotiable stance for clout, it reveals a profound opportunism. This is fake love, the love of self and status masquerading as love for people. Then there are the established voices like Roland Martin, who represented the politics of respectable centrism. His fight is not for liberation, but for a better inclusion into the existing power structure. He argues for a more diverse representation within a very system that Assata Shakur correctly identified as an enemy of the people. This is not Pan-Africanism. It is a plea for a more equitable share of the spoils within the imperial framework. A fight for a bigger piece of the pie while the plantation itself remains intact. These figures are dangerous because they drain every energy and focus. They redirect righteous anger into dead-end electoralism or empty cultural debates, creating an illusion of progress, while the fundamental machinery of state terror and imperial violence and the same machinery that targeted Assata and Mumia continues to operate unchallenged. Assata didn't risk her life for better representation in the Democratic Party. Mumia didn't endure decades of death row for a more polite conversation about policing. Their sacrifices demand a politics and uncompromising opposition to the entire system. The grifters' goal is to make us forget this. They offer a palatable, non-threatening version of struggle that comforts the colonized minds, but leaves the colonizer's power untouched. Therefore, honoring Assata and Mumia requires more than just reciting their names. It demands a ruthless intellectual clarity that separates the revolutionary from the performers. It forces us to ask, does the person's work seek to dismantle the empire as this network does, to dismantle empire? Or does it just want to get a better deal from it? Does it just want to work within the parameters and not have to worry about it not being fair, unequitable under a capitalist system? Or do they side with the oppressed in a global struggle? Or do they side with respectability and access? The terror state makes examples of all of the Assatas to scare us into silence. The grifters, the centrists offer us a microphone to sing a softer song. Both are enemies of true liberation. The path forward is to reject both the overt terror and the seductive fake love, and to embrace the difficult, uncompromising internationalism that Assata Shakur laid out for us. Her legacy is not just a memory, it is a filter through which we must view every leader, every influencer, and every ounce of rhetoric that comes our way. We cannot keep allowing people like Danny Milagro, who used to wear pink Barbie Zionist shirts. When you guys see this, it's going to be crazy. You don't get to for 6 months be a Zionist, and then now you get to call yourself a Pan-Africanist, and then you're being like the most 1990. When you see these pictures, you guys are going to laugh. Because he looks like that dude from Spike Lee's fucking movie where he's like, I'm black, y'all. I'm black, y'all. I'm bliggity, bliggity, bliggity black, y'all. Like, that's what he look. It's wild. He looks like Nancy Pelosi on his knees. It is crazy. When I get this video chopped up and minced for you guys, it is going to be hilarious what I say about him. What I have already said about him that is on recording. It is ridiculous. So I wanted to call them out. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of Assata Shakur, go down what actually happened, why we should be putting ourselves in a very clear and distinct position to fight for the continuation of her legacy. to never fight and never stop for the continuation of our of our liberation, the struggle for that. I just wanted to point that all out for you guys. There's some announcements. We do have a begathon, so if you want to help us out, ways to do so. We are trying to reach a goal of $1,200. We want to say thank you to Madeline Woodley. She donated $100 to the network. You can do the same exact thing. We're not asking for big donations like that. Also, we thank you that we are very, 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 very much thankful. But I would really love, for the small ones. $5 here and there goes a long way. 16 cents a day adds up to $5 a month. If you have $5 that you can give this network to just forget about it, please do so. That's all we ask. But if you can't, hey, you're in the same position like us, then, like, share, and subscribe. That's the best thing we can ask you to do, because it's the best thing next to donating if you didn't have the ability to do so. So I just wanted to end on a good note there. If you, again, liked what you've seen, like what you heard, like, share, subscribe. I will see you guys in the next one. And again, rest in peace, Assata Shakur, and free them all. But most importantly, free every single political prisoner, and never, never, ever refrain from saying every single one of their names. I will see you guys in the next one.